Once ISA servers in place, you're going to want to allow your clients to connect to the server so they can get out on the internet. Now, we've already seen devices connecting to the net in these videos, and we've configured a rule or two to allow this internet communication to take place. ISA server supports 3 different types of firewall clients. Now, the good news is that we've actually configured 2 of them already in these videos, although you mightn't have realized it, as both of them required no additional software. Any modern Windows operating system, in fact any modern operating system, even if it's not Windows, will be able to do the job. Now, of the 3 types of firewall client, the only one that really requires any additional software is the firewall client. Firewall clients require a little bit of software to be installed on the computer, and its job is to contact the ISA server each time the computer needs to access resources on the internet. So this firewall client will require it to be authenticated by the ISA server, and it will filter the computer's request based on the firewall rules and the application filters. Now, the firewall client is also the most secure of all of the types of client. However, it is worth noting though that because this client requires some software to be installed on it, it has to be a Windows computer. You won't be able to use a Linux or a Unix system to become a firewall client. So the downside of the firewall client is you need to install some additional software. Now, the upside is that it supports encryption. So traffic from our client to the ISA server is encrypted for better security. Plus, with the firewall client, you also have better logging capabilities. Now, both of these things are good, encryption and logging capabilities, although logging capabilities, you might be thinking, big deal now, but when you need to track a user's activities, you're going to be glad you had that firewall client active. So, should you choose to use the firewall client option? Sure. If you're going with an ISA server, I can't see any reason why you wouldn't want to deploy the firewall client as well, apart from the fact that there's a little more work to do, but hey, that's a minor thing. Now, the other 2 options we have are to install a secure NAT client or a web proxy client. And to configure either of these is really, really simple. Firstly, with our secure NAT client, it doesn't actually have firewall client software installed on it. Instead, secure NAT clients are simply configured to route all requests for resources to the ISA server, and they're then governed by the ISA server's firewall rules and policies. Now, the advantage of the secure NAT client is that to configure one, all you need to do is to configure the default gateway on your client and have it point to the ISA server. Alternatively, you could configure it to point to a router that's then configured to forward IP packets to the ISA server. Either way, that's all you need to do. So let me repeat that just in case you missed it. If you configure your default gateway to point to the ISA server, you now have a secure NAT client. That doesn't get any easier than that, really. So secure NAT is incredibly easy to configure, but it doesn't provide any authentication because in order to authenticate with the ISA server, you need to have that firewall client installed. Now, the upside, of course, also with a secure NAT client is that it can be used on any platform, not just Windows, so it does make for a rather flexible option. Now, our other type down here is the web proxy client, and the web proxy client is also easy to configure, but it requires the computer to have a web proxy application installed and configured to use the ISA server. Now, in case this sounds like it might be a pain to source some sort of web proxy application, don't worry, you already have one on a Windows computer, and that's Internet Explorer. So, like with the default gateway configuration for our secure NAT client, for the web proxy client, all you need to do is to configure Internet Explorer to use a proxy server. And if you don't know how to do that, don't worry, we're going to show you how to do it later on. So in a nutshell, If you have non-Windows clients, you'll then be able to use Secure NAT and web proxy clients, but if you've got Windows clients, then you have the ability to use the firewall client, which of course is recommended for better security. Alright, well let's move on and let's see how we can configure all three of these different types of clients. Alright, so here I'm on our Windows Vista workstation, and we're going to first install a web proxy client. In fact, if we click on Start and we simply open up a command prompt, and let's just type in ipconfig, you'll see right here that my default gateway is already pointing to 10.32.0.250, which is my ISA server. So in effect, we already have a secure NAT client on this PC. See, I told you it was easier to set up. Configure the default gateway, make it point to the ISA server, and hey presto, you've got a secure NAT client. Alright, well, let's now configure this Windows Vista workstation become a web proxy client. So to do that, we'll open up Internet Explorer. We'll click on the Tools menu, and at the bottom we'll select Internet Options. Now we'll click on the Connections tab, and at the bottom here we're going to choose the LAN Settings button. And now we'll check this box at the bottom here to use a proxy server for our LAN, and we could simply enter in the name of our ISA server, which in my case would be LA-ISA, and then enter in the port of 8080. And if we do that, by the way, we could also choose to bypass our proxy server for any local addresses that are on our internal network. So let's click OK and OK again. And now if we decide to perform some sort of search here, this request is now going through the ISA server's proxy and it's being cached on our ISA server. Alright, well this time let's go back to the Tools menu, Internet Options, the Connections tab, LAN Settings, and this time we'll configure IE to use a configuration script. So in here, we'll enter in HTTP followed by the name of our server, LAISA, :8080, array.dll, and $get.routing.script. So you'll need to enter in the exact same thing for your server, just of course substituting the host name of your ISA server there. Now the advantage of using this method over manually entering in the server name and port like we showed you in the first example is that in the event that our ISA server here has its configuration changed, then each time IE wants to connect to the internet, it'll first go and download the script, and any changes to how the proxy needs to be configured are going to be automatically applied. Now, in all honesty though, while both of these methods work, you won't configure them manually like I've just done, because if you've got more than one PC in your company, and I suspect that you do, then you're going to want to use group policy to set that up, and then apply that policy to all of the computers in your company. So on my domain controller here, we're going to click on Start, and we'll go to the Administrative Tools, and we'll fire up our Group Policy Management Console. Okay, now we'll expand our forest, and then we'll expand domains, and finally our domain, jawkus.com, and we'll right-click on our default domain policy and choose Edit. Now under the User Configuration heading, we're going to expand Policies, and then we'll expand Windows Settings, Internet Explorer Maintenance, and we'll select Connection. Now in the right-hand side here of our console, we'll double-click on Connection Settings, and we'll choose this second radio button here to import the current connection settings from this machine, and we'll click Modify, because of course this is a new machine, this is our domain controller, so they aren't currently set on this machine. So we'll go to the Connections tab, LAN Settings, and we're going to choose to use an automatic configuration script. And we're going to paste in that URL that we used earlier, which is HTTP, our server name, :8080, and you know the rest. And we'll click OK, OK, and OK again. Alright, well, we've just switched back to our Windows Vista client, so we're going to come back here into our automatic configuration script field. And what I'm going to quickly do is I'm just going to change this just so we can see if our change to group policy is reflected here in Internet Explorer. So I'm going to change this LA-ISA to something else. And obviously there is no box called something else, so that should be incorrect. All right, now we're going to open up a command prompt in administrator's mode, and we're going to type in GP update, and we'll hit enter. And what this command is going to do is going to contact our domain controller and refresh our group policy, and hopefully it's going to pick up and apply our change that we just made. Now, if it doesn't update straight away, just be patient. Sometimes group policy will take a moment to update itself, but either way, it will change at the next update cycle. All right, so we'll go back to Internet Explorer, and we'll click on the Tools menu and select Internet Options, then the Connections tab and LAN Settings. And right here we can see that our configuration script location of LA-ISA has now been put back by group policy, and of course this policy will now be in effect for all of the computers in our domain. So using this method to set your automatic configuration script is going to save you a lot of time. Okay, well, we've now seen how to configure a secure NAT client as well as a web proxy client. So let's move on and configure a firewall client. So we've got a couple of ways of installing the firewall client. Actually, that's sort of true and not. We could do it manually by running setup at each workstation where we want that firewall client to be installed, but that's really not a viable option. I mean, who wants to do that? So our other option, and really the only option, is to deploy the firewall client using group policy or some other method of software distribution. Now, we do have a problem though. You see, even though I've got the latest version of ISA Server 2006 installed, the firewall client component isn't the latest version and it won't install on our Windows Vista machine. Now, if you're deploying the client to Windows XP, obviously the one that comes on the ISA Server 2006 CD will work, and you're going to find it inside the clients folder on the CD. However, if you point your browser to this URL here, you'll be able to download the latest version of the software, which is a good idea anyway, of course, having the latest. So regardless of whether you need to support Vista or not, I'd recommend that you come in here and download the latest version. So we're on our domain controller here, and I've downloaded the latest version of the firewall client, and I've put it on a folder here called Clients, and it's in the root of my C drive. Now, I'll be honest with you though, in a production environment, I'd find a better spot to put these files than on my domain controller. You'll probably have some sort of software share which would be more structured, but it doesn't really matter where it's stored from a functionality perspective though, just as long as our machines can access the share. So what we'll do here is we're going to right click on our clients folder and we'll choose properties, then the sharing tab, and we'll choose advanced sharing, and we'll check this box to share this folder. And for the purposes of this lab, I'm going to choose permissions and I'm going to grant everyone full control, and we'll click OK and then OK again. Alright, we'll now go and open up a command prompt, and I'm going to change into my clients folder there, as we'll need to extract the MSI file from our archive that we're going to use to deploy to our clients. So I'm going to type in an I and hit tab, and that's going to auto-complete the name of the file. So I'm going to add in at the end of this a /T:/C and the path to our folder, and we'll hit enter. And in fact, I've just noticed I've typed that in incorrectly. I typed in client rather than client, but that's okay. We'll just grab those files there and let's just pop them into our share. All right, now what we're going to do is we're going to click on Start. We're going to go to Administrative Tools and we'll launch Active Directory Users and Computers. Now we'll click on our domain here, jawkus.com, and we're going to right click and create a new organizational unit, and we can call this one whatever we like, but for the purposes of this exercise I'm going to call it Firewall Clients, and we'll click OK. Now I'm going to go to my computers container here, and I'm going to grab the computer account for our Windows Vista workstation, and I'm going to drag and drop that into our firewall clients OU. All right, now let's go and switch over to our group policy management console, and we'll open that up again. And we'll expand our forest, our domains, our domain. All right, there's our new firewall clients OU, so let's right click on that. We'll choose to create a GPO in this domain and link it here. Now we can call this object whatever we like. Let's just say we're going to call it install the firewall client, and we'll click OK. All right, now we'll expand firewall clients, and we'll right click on our policy and choose edit. Now under the computer configuration heading, we're going to expand policies, then software settings, and we're going to select software installation. Now as you can see on the right hand side, we currently don't have any packages defined, so we're going to right click and choose a new package. Now in our file name box down here, we're going to type in the path to our firewall client share, and that of course is our server name followed by clients. And of course the file name that we're looking for here is our MS firewall client MSI file, and there it is. So we're going to select that. We'll click open. Now when we deploy the firewall client, we can either use the assigned or the advanced method. Now the difference being is that the advanced method here will allow us to modify the package if we like, but we don't need to do that. We're just going to leave the default at assigned and click OK. And there's our new package created. Okay, now I've just switched back to our Windows Vista machine. So in order for our new package to take effect immediately, I'm going to open up a command prompt and we'll type in GP update and refresh this machine with the new policy that we just created. All right, now our policy has been completed. The refresh has been completed. So what we're going to do is we're going to restart this Windows Vista machine, and when it reboots, hopefully our new firewall client should automatically be installed. So we'll shut this down and we'll be back in just a moment. Okay, well, we've just logged on, we've just restarted this Vista machine here, and notice that right down here in the system tray area that we've got a new icon for our firewall client. But as you can see, it's got this red X on it telling us that we have a problem. So if we right click on this icon here and we'll select configure, this is going to bring up a new window where we've got a couple of tabs. So let's select the settings tab, as this is where we can define which ISA server this computer should be connecting to. Now you can see at the top here that the default setting here is to enable the client, but it's currently not connected. And we can either have this client try to automatically attempt to detect the ISA server, of course, which it's failing to do right now, or set it up manually by clicking this radio button and then entering in the name of the server. So in my case, I'd select this and simply enter in LA ISA and click the test server button. And in fact, let's give that a go. We'll type in LA ISA and we'll hit test server. And we can see that it has successfully contacted the correct server. So we can rejoice, it works. But let's get serious. Your users aren't going to do this. Configuring the firewall client, it's your job, not theirs. So let's fix the problem. Let's forget this manual rubbish. We'll click close here, and we're going to set it up so it's all automatic. We can't rely on our users to set this up for us. That's our job. All right, now the reason why our firewall client here couldn't automatically contact the ISA server is that it's got no idea where to find it. So this is where you can configure DHCP or DNS to help out. Now you can configure what's known as a WPAD entry in either DHCP or DNS. Now you could do either, but for this lab, we'll use DNS. All right, well, I've switched back to my domain controller here, so let's go and fire up the DNS console. We'll expand our server here, forward lookup zones, and we'll select our domain. Now we're going to right-click, and we'll choose to create a new alias or CNAME record, and we'll give this record the name of WPAD, WPAD, and we'll click the Browse button. and we'll dig down into our server, forward lookup zones, our domain, and we're going to locate the DNS entry for our ISA server, which is LA ISA. So we'll select that, we'll click OK, and OK again, and now our DNS component is complete. Now the next step is to switch back to our ISA server and expand our server here, LA ISA, expand configuration, and we're going to select networks. Now in the middle of this window here, we're going to right click on internal and we'll choose properties. Now up here we'll select the auto discovery tab and we're going to choose to publish automatic discovery information for this network. Now the other tab that you'll want to be aware of here for this window is the Firewall Client tab. Now it's here that our ISA server will be configured for the Firewall Client. Now everything should be correct here already. For example, we need to have this top box checked to enable the Firewall Client support, and the name of your ISA server should be here populated and be correct. But I wanted to point this screen out because if you're running an ISA server in a work group and not in a domain like I am, then you'll need to ensure that DNS can resolve the name of your ISA server. Alternatively, you can enter in an IP address here. All right, well, let's click OK, and we're going to apply that change. Okay, now I've just switched back to our Windows Vista machine, and this time we're going to choose to automatically detect our ISA server. And when we click Detect Now, this time it works fine. It's found and correctly identified our ISA server, and now this Firewall Client is configured correctly. So right down here, you'll notice if we hover our mouse over the Firewall Client icon, you can see firstly that it's changed to a blue PC here over the top of the icon, and it now shows us that we're connected to LA ISA, which of course is our ISA server. So now any new Firewall clients that we deploy using group policy will be automatically connected to the correct ISA server. Now I might also point out that whilst we have this window open, that on the web browser tab, the default here is to enable automatic configuration for our web browser, and our client is going to pull the proxy configuration it needs from the ISA server itself. And just to make sure that everything works as planned, if we go and open up Internet Explorer, yes, you can see that we can get out into the internet, and if we click Tools, Internet Options, Connections tab, LAN Settings, you can see that all of these fields here have been updated from our ISA server, and they're all correct. So in this video, we've taken a look at the 3 different types of ISA server clients that there are. We've got Secure NAT, Web Proxy, and the Firewall Client. And we saw that it's pretty easy to use group policy to roll that Firewall Client out to your computers in your network. Now we saw that the Secure NAT client was definitely the easiest to configure because all we had to configure was the default gateway to get to the ISA server, and that's it. The Web Proxy client was also really easy to configure, but it does require a web proxy application like Internet Explorer to work. But of course, it's supported by other operating systems as well, but it only works using HTTP, HTTPS, and FTP over HTTP. Now we finished with a look at the slightly more complicated but much more secure Firewall client, which can only be installed on Windows machines. But since the Firewall client offers encryption and much better logging options, in all cases, wherever possible, I'd certainly recommend that you install the Firewall client. So we hope you've enjoyed this video and would like to thank you for watching.